Welcome to the Pixelated Perfect Podcast. Hey, Elena, thank you for joining me on my podcast, Pixelated Perfect.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Yay, awesome. So, Elena, I was trying to remember when I met you. Time is weird. I don't know if it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago. I don't know exactly when, but when I met you, you were kind of a graphic designer looking to transition. And I've kind of seen you through transitioning from that stage to being a product designer, being a UI UX designer, to kind of being there to mentor junior designers and help them get on track. And to today, you are running your own company, and I want to hear about all that good stuff. I know you're building a house, so you've done a lot in like such a short period of time. And what I really want to focus on, and what I think a lot of listeners want to hear about, is kind of how you made that transition and all of those steps. Like, what were those hard things? What were those easy things? And so maybe to start off with, if you want to just kind of tell your story of where you started to today, and then we can kind of dive back in and have more conversations about some of those specific moments.
Yeah, absolutely. I know there's a lot going on. So I used to be a graphic designer, and so I did the whole graduate from college, okay, my big move to New York City, moved to New York without a job or an apartment, don't really have anything to my name kind of thing. And it felt like the right move, where everything that I wanted to do, I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew something was going to fall into place. And I think that mentality is the thing that has kept me with this momentum through every stage. So it's not just that spring chicken feeling of, okay, I'm so fresh, but even when I'm in the depth of it, still being excited and knowing that there's still more to come is like pushing me forward. So I was working at an events company, like a conference events company for private equity, which I knew nothing about. And so I was just cranking out a bunch of ads, magazine, posters. I was not into it at all. It just didn't really feel right, but I didn't really know what else was going on. And so because I mentioned I did design, people who don't know what design is, they think everything is design, and they're like, oh, you must do this one thing. And I'm like, no, there's actually, 50 kinds of design. And so that's when I first heard about UX, because someone mentioned like, oh, do you know about UX? And I said, absolutely not. And so I went to a workshop through General Assembly. It was just a free workshop. And so that's where I learned about the world of UX, user experience, product design, all of that good stuff. And as they were talking about it, everything just lit up. I was like, oh, wait, yeah, me. And I felt like everything they were saying, I want to raise my hand and just scream, I've been looking for this. The thing that really solidified it for me was there was a case study that a team was working in an oncology wing in a hospital, like a kid's oncology wing, and they transformed the MRI machine into a pirate ship. And I was like, what? How is that a job? I don't even understand how this could be a thing. And one of the biggest pieces of feedback that stuck with me, even to this day, and I tell so many people, is one of the kids asked their mom when they can go back to the hospital. And it blew my mind that you could utilize design and make those kind of strategic decisions to make such a scary experience for a kid so fun that they're like, yeah, I really want to go get more cancer treatment so I can go to this ship. And that's when I knew this is the kind of work that I want to be doing. And so I'm pretty intense when I do things. So when I commit to something, I'm like, let's go. So that was that light bulb moment where I knew this is the kind of career I want to build. And I think about that pirate ship pushing me forward every single day. And so I just jumped in. I didn't just jump. I feel like I dove in with like some rocks tied around my neck, trying to drown myself, where, oh, you're not leaving UX for a really long time. And I've just kept up the momentum. So yeah, Dianne, I know you gave me a really great opportunity you gave me my start. I wouldn't even be here without you. So for those of you that are listening, I knew you had to do all these coffee dates, but I wanted to do something a little bit different. So I went onto one of the Slack groups. I think the one you and I met on was Ladies Get Paid, or hexagon. It's one of those. And instead of just saying like, oh, hey, I want to pick someone's brain, or hey, I want to learn more about you, I said, I want to learn what you're doing. I will do all your crappy work, like your logistics. Like I'll basically be your assistant for free if you let me shadow you. Who's up for it? And Dianne came in hot and said, actually, I'll hire you. And I went, oh my God. And just like knowing that someone was willing to take a chance on me is also the reason why I have this mentorship program now. And I've tried to hire more junior UX designers. So it's a very full circle thing. And so, I mean, long story short of what happened in the last 2 years. So yeah, I was Dianne's apprentice, and then I just continued on doing more freelance stuff. And then finally I was brave enough to quit my full-time graphic design job and said, absolutely no more. No more InDesign, no more. And just fully commit myself to different kinds of UX roles. And so ever since then, I've tried to get my hands in all kinds of industries, all kinds of like contract and freelance. I did full-time for a little bit, and then I realized, no, I want to hop around more and more. And so now I launched my own UX studio in December. And so I am fully like a contractor where I can do exactly what I want. I can work on a bunch of different projects. And in the last 2 years, I've worked with 22 clients. And amplifying, becoming an apprentice to a senior, I got hired as a senior interaction designer within 2 years. Not to, make unrealistic things, but you do have to give it your all, and then your all's all. And I, not to glorify overworking, because there are definitely some boundaries I think I crossed for myself, but just learning in hindsight what you want, it's going to take a lot more than you first think. But no regrets, but that's my story in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's amazing. I have things I want to pick apart further. One of the things I want to focus on, I want to talk about the early stages, but I want to know more about how you made that transition from being a mid-level, a junior level, and jumping. But to start off with, I wanted to address like one of the reasons that I kind of reached out and I was so inspired and wanted you to join the design project. And I think that like, if anyone's listening, they hear like the enthusiasm from you, like the get-go, like you're like, if you tell me to do it, I'm going to do it. And I think like how you position yourself and how you're like, you know what, you want me to do something, you want me to do something for free, you want me to do something paid, I don't care, just I want experience. And I love that about you. And I've always loved like your passion, and you're like, you want to be the best, you want to do the best. And I think that's something where a lot of freelancers or people getting into it, they're like, oh, I want to track my hours, I don't want to overwork. And I think that is an interesting balance, and I think life is about balances, but I think especially at that beginning, you have to like be willing to jump in and give it your all, and know that it's going to take you longer because you're learning, and just be open to that. So I don't know if you have anything to add, but I think like what you brought to me was like just this energy and this willingness and this love of just like doing it all, that like I was like, oh my gosh, this girl's awesome.
That's really kind. I think another thing, and this is advice to people who are also trying to make that jump, is you have to just do it. Your portfolio is never going to be done, period. And so I also recognize that just having, going through like a boot camp or learning some things, that's not going to cut it, especially now in 2022. UX is so saturated with like, especially during COVID, everyone is like, oh my God, I want to do a UX designer. And I'm sure a lot of people have good intentions, but a lot of times it is very flashy. You get to work in tech, you get to work from home, you could potentially make a lot of money. And so people kind of lose sight of it. And so that's what's going to make you actually get the job. So I run a mentorship program, and that is a huge thing. I'm saying it's not, the bar is different now than when I joined. It's been, even though it's only been 2 years, just having a few class projects, when also the other 99% of people have probably the same exact case studies as you. Did you redesign Spotify? Redesign Instagram? Like, that is not going to cut it anymore. And, people can be like, oh, no, I'm sure you have some good stuff. I'm just going to be very honest. Like, I approach everything with no BS. It's going to be super hard for you. People are going to be bored. They've seen it a million times. You need to go and find something else, whether it's going down to your local pizzeria. I did that in college, actually. I didn't have any, I knew I wanted to be a graphic designer at that time. And I didn't have any internships related to graphic design because I didn't know that's what I wanted. So I literally called up my local pizzeria and my local library and said, hey, can I just like make you a logo? And they're like, yeah, sure. I mean, they didn't end up using it, but I still did a thing for a real company. I had that on my resume and I had it in my portfolio and it was legit. The library did actually use it and I made their social media posts. And it's like, I mean, they're super cringy now. It's like a silhouette sitting against some books, but they still use it.
It's so hard to look back on work you did in the past.
It's
so
rough.
hard.
It's so rough. But like now I have 2 internships because I structured and I literally made it. And I said, hey, can we just like, you don't have to do anything. I will make the structure for you. We'll just have weekly check-ins. I'll treat you like a client. You can, give me your deliverables. So now if I need to talk about an interview, I have a real stakeholder, a real company, real problems to solve. And these are things that I just kind of found to be problems, or just someone needed something and it happened. So those are the things you have to do if you want to stand out. And that's just kind of how it is now.
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely think that's how it is now. But I also think that like I think of you and you do stand out because you've always done those things. And before UX blew up in the past 2 years when I did meet you, is you already stood out and you were already doing those things. You did those things in college. And so I think like even more so now, but like anything you can do to make you stand out, anything like that differentiates you. And yes, no more redesigning Spotify.
Stop.
Like,
it's fine. It's a great app. It's a great app already. Please stop.
Exactly. Do you have any idea how much money they spend to build what they have? You, junior designer, are never.
Yes. It's too much. It's too much.
Oh, amen. Amen. So I want to talk about this transition from you getting into design, you being a junior designer, to quickly moving up from junior designer to senior designer. And then I want to talk about founding, but let's start there. What did that look like for you, and what are some of the challenges or some of the really awesome things that happened?
I think a lot of it is just going with it. I've always been a very type A, schedule-oriented person, and I still live off of my calendar. But in college, was like, okay, I gotta have a plan, or like I was like, why don't I have a job lined up, or I gotta do all these things. And sometimes it's helpful, and I think I did lay the groundwork to have those skills and confidence now. But you can't plan these kind of things. No, I didn't know what UX was 4 years ago. I never heard of it. It didn't occur to me. And so how can you even plan for something like that? So just being really chill of someone says, hey, can you do this thing? I'm like, yeah, sure. Maybe it's not an industry that I'm super jazzed about, but now I know about it. Like I've been able to touch industries that I normally wouldn't even want to. And, for the better, because it's also important to work in industries and find out which ones you don't want to do. So for example, like e-commerce, I really have no interest in doing it. It doesn't really align with any of the things that, I don't really care about shopping. And so now I know that that's not something that I want to be doing. But saying yes to that immediately and just saying, absolutely, let's learn about this. Let's see what's working. And also, what does one industry have to do with another one? So just trying a lot of those things out. And I think that's why I was able to go, because I wasn't picky. Like I kind of threw any kind of expectation out the window of being like, listen, I just want to do. We'll reflect later. Reflection is very important. But right now, there's nothing to reflect on. You just got to do it. Do. That's step one always. So that's just like the baseline of everything.
Yeah. And so when you just did and you jumped into these industries that you knew nothing about, were you just leaning on those UX UI skills that you had already learned to like help you discover, or you were learning on the spot? What did that look like for you?
I think it was a mix of just trust, like knowing that I'm a competent person. And so like for anyone listening, the fact that you're listening to this podcast means you're already trying to better yourself. You're trying to be a better designer. So you're already probably more ahead than you think you are. So I'm just comparing, contrasting. My very first job when I got hired at this private equity place, I was like, oh my God, I don't know anything about it. And I like did so much research. I was like trying to listen to all these investor podcasts. And now, like, honestly, I'll show up to this thing where I don't know anything about it. And I'm like, I will figure it out. That's what user research is all about. Where you, once you're in it, you are in it. Because you're doing the audits of different tools for competitor analysis. You're talking to the real people and you're asking questions. That's how you're going to learn. So get out of your head the idea of, oh my God, I need to be an expert before I start anything. Because that's just like, that's going to hold you back so much. And it's also just a huge waste of time when you could just be fine-tuning your skills to do research or just to be a critical thinker because you're trying to prepare too much.
I love that. Yeah, you don't need to be an expert. And I think a lot of times, even as an entrepreneur and a business owner, is like, you can't overthink because there's so many unknowns. And it's like, and that's something we do a lot at TDP. And I would love to hear what you guys do is like, let's just throw out an idea. Let's just throw it out there. Let's not spend much time on it. Let's just put a landing page together, see if anyone's interested. And I think that's such a great tool. Like, don't overthink, just do and see what happens and then go from there.
Yeah, because you can't refine anything if there's nothing to refine because it doesn't exist yet. I was telling my cohort, I'm a very like anti-Pixel Perfect. I know that I think that's the name of the podcast, but
it's pixelated.
Oh, that's
not pixel.
Oh, I love that.
Perfect.
Because I remember one of my mentees was like, well, I get so hung up on making things look perfect. And I was like, then you're not, like, honestly, you're not going to last. You will not last in this industry. And I'm going to tell you, like, I'm not saying you specifically aren't going to last. You got to get that out of your head. But if you have that mentality, you're not going to last because nothing is ever going to be this perfect. And if you spend too much time, you're already behind. You're not going to have enough literal time or mental time to like actually do those iterations. If you're like, and then you also get tied to it. If you spend all this energy making something look perfect, of course you're not going to want to destroy it. You just spend so much time.
Right.
So then it's like, just quickly, boop, 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 we scratch it out. We just, vomit. And then we're like, hey, what do we think? And then someone says, actually, that really sucks. You're like, I'm glad you told me that. Because I only spent 10 minutes on it instead of like a whole week. And then your better ideas will come out after you like get rid of your bad ideas first. So you have to do that step.
Yes. No, I love that. I also think that as you progress in your career and you go from junior to mid to senior, it's like you're doing more of those really complex thoughts and like putting together wireframes and user flows. And then usually the pixel perfection, depending on the team you're on, it's like it comes from the junior designers or other people. And it's like, I think those big ideas and those big challenges are what's really going, if you're looking to like advance your career as a designer, that's like where you spend your time.
Yeah, the holistic part, and that's also my favorite part, more of, I'm not the most detail-oriented person, and, I'm working on that, but I'm recognizing where my strengths are, and I'm leaning into that, especially, and earlier in my career, I wasn't able to see that because I hadn't really done it, but now that I've done all these different projects, I can see where I fit best, so I can also see where I should be doing something and where I need to bring in other people. So, like, when it comes to proofreading, I actually just have someone else proofread my stuff because, like, it's going to take too much time and I'm not going to do a good job. So I might as well have someone else come in and do that. So outsourcing is also a huge part of things that I've learned since, like, launching a business and doing mentorship. And that's how I feel like I've actually progressed into this next phase of everything, of realizing you need to ask for help. And you can actually do better by asking for help with things, especially with things that you're good at. So I had this huge like epiphany a few weeks ago of you spend so much time being like, okay, yeah, no, I want feedback on these things I'm bad at, but I don't really need help on these things. I'm good at X, Y, Z. I don't need help on those. I need help on A, B, C. But actually, you should probably extra get help on those ones because you're already stuck, but you don't know you are because you think you're so good at it. And so now I've actually been able to back up. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a super interesting I feel like I've said this on the podcast before, but I feel like the more I grow, the more I'm in my career, I realize I know nothing.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
And it's like learning from other people, and I think that is like distinguishing someone that's an entrepreneur or advanced in their career for someone that's a beginner. And you can probably speak to this because you have a cohort. It's like when you're the beginner, it's like you're unsure of yourself, so you just like pretend like you know everything, and you just like
Yes.
kind of fake it. And then as you progress and you know things, then you're like, oh, let's question all these things I know because I can become better.
Yes, and like getting over that hump, at first it's tough because you're like, why would I spend time on something that I'm already good at? And then I'm like, that is so ignorant. I'm like so young. There's no way. Like I freelanced for a few different places as well. And each one kind of serves it fills my cup in a different kind of way. But there's one place that they pay me the least out of all the places. And everyone's like, why are you keeping them? I'm like, because I'm learning the most, because I'm too early in my career, or even if I was even further in my career, I can't be the most senior person everywhere I go. I'm way too young for that. Like that is, like I've really only been in UX for like under 3 years. Absolutely not. Even if I have a senior role, there needs to be someone more senior than me. It's somewhere in the picture because I can't plateau. It's too early. It's too early. So just like reeling myself back in, because we all have those times where it's like, yeah, I like to be confident, and I don't really struggle with feeling like I don't belong, but I also recognize there's a huge gap that I physically will not be able to fill because I've just not been in the space long enough to even have some of the knowledge that exists for people who've been doing it for like 10 years.
Right. And I mean, that goes back to like, you planned, but at the end of the day, you don't know what's going to happen. Like, you didn't know UX was possible until 4 years ago, and look at you now. And so, like learning. How do you feel about mentorship? So you are a mentor, you mentor. Do you have a mentor, or what does that like relationship look like?
Yeah. So I have a mentor. Her name is Elena, which is funny because I'm Elena. And she's great. We don't really talk as much now because she was really there to help me like get started. And I looked up to you as a mentor as well. Like I definitely leaned on other people more when I was getting started, but I am trying to call back to people now. But the thing I'm focusing on right now is getting other people into the space. So mentorship is really important to me because I had a lot of support, and there's that. I would not be here without any of those people. And I also recognize a lot of the privilege that I had to be able to make a lot of the jumps that I did and even know how to access those kinds of people. And so the way this all started was, I'll do the medium story because it's a short, medium, long explanation.
There we go. I like it. Okay, medium level.
Medium. So when I made the jump to go full freelance, as a contractor, I had my LLC, all that good stuff. I was like, okay, I'm going to do my own studio. And which really, it operates basically the exact same way. It's cool. And
you just have an LLC, which is exciting.
Yeah, I have an LLC, and now I have more of a capability to hire people if I want to. And I purposely wanted to hire more junior designers who followed in the same path that I did, where they need their own Dianne. They need someone to be like, I see you can do a good thing. Like, I want to bring you on and kind of nurture that. And so when I created, it's called Anele. When I created Anele, I specifically made it clear in the job posting, because I hired one person, this is not your dream job. I do not want this to be anyone's dream job. I want this to be your foot in the door. Like, this is your step one. And I made that really clear to everyone of, I'm here to mentor you, to like compensate you, and to give you like standards, and also to find out what it's like to be respected, because I think there's a lot of like weird power dynamics with juniors where it's like, okay, you just have to do everything for free. And I'm like, no, I am going to compensate all of you because you are actually helping me make money and you're doing a service. And so just setting standards for how people should be treated. So that's what happened. But anyways, I had way too many applications. I had about 280 applications for a part-time job in like a week, and I was like, "What?"
Wow. Was it a LinkedIn post?
Yeah, it blew up, and I was just like, this is really cool, but also what? And I really wanted to shake up the way that I was hiring. I was like, don't send me your resume. I don't care. I care about your portfolio, and I want to know what's important to you. You don't need to like kiss. I don't know what to. You don't have to suck up to me and be like, oh, why? This is why I want to work at your agency. I know you just want an opportunity, but I want to know what's important to you as a designer. So I just asked like 2 very simple questions, something along the lines of, like, what are you most proud of as a designer? And then what's something you want to work on? And then send you your portfolio. That's all I want from you. And it really showed. People had a lot of heart. Like, they wanted a lot of things, and they just needed that break, that big break. And so my heart obviously was like, oh man, I obviously can't hire all of you. And so I interviewed 10 people, and it was extremely hard. All of them were so solid. I could have hired any of them and felt really good, but you can't really do that. So I picked one, and they ended up creating a whole other. I found a project because there were 2 people who stood out to me that I was like, I just want you so badly in my life and in my job. Like, I know you can do great things. And so I actually hired them to work on Converge, my other passion project. And so like I created a job for them. And then I still had these other people just linger around. And so I was like, what if I do a cohort and make a mentorship program where these people are all really solid, but why didn't they get the job? And so I want to work with people who are great, but make them amazing. And so that's kind of how the mentorship program came to be, where I created, I like systems and organization. So it wasn't just like, hey, let's just do a coffee date. I want to create a kind of structure where we're covering the most important things. Because there's like, hundreds of things that you could talk about to be a good designer or to get a job. But what is the most pressing thing? We need to make sure your portfolio is airtight. When you tell your story, can you do it concisely? Are you engaging? How are you different from other people? And your portfolio doesn't just say, hi, I'm empathetic and I'm a storyteller. Those are blacklisted. In my cohort, they're not allowed to use the word empathetic storyteller or boot camp. I have a whole list of words that no one is allowed to use. But and then it just became a thing because that one finished, and then I was like, I want to make this better. And so I did it one more time. So we're now at the 3rd cohort, and I feel so confident. We have a really robust system. It's an 8-week program. We have a curriculum. There's homework, there's check-ins, there's accountability. We have different guests come in. And it's very self-sufficient. So I don't want people to feel like if they have questions, they need to come to me. I want them to ask the group and see how they can help each other and actually empower them to do it. Because I don't want people to need me. My job is done when they are like self-sufficient. So hopefully they can take those skills. And so then when they start mentoring people, because I know these people and they totally will. They're just the type of people who want to engage with people and help others. So I want to craft that kind of environment. So I know right now, my cohort's the biggest it's ever been. We have 18 people. And so I'm not helping 18 people. I'm actually helping, in theory, like hundreds of people, because all those people that those people are going to now help, I'm not saying they're all going to start a mentorship program, but now I guarantee you at least some of them are going to lead a team, and they're going to keep some of the things that we've talked about, like boundaries. That's a huge thing. I say we're done at this time. I'm not going to go into your personal time, or do not message me after this time, or just all these things that people are commonly walked over. I'm like, no, this is the standard, and we're creating it right now because I want them to carry it with them through the rest of their career. So that's my take on mentorship. And I love it. It's just also just really fun because it's cool to talk about these things and see it in action.
Yeah. No, I think that's amazing. And, something that you said, a couple things you said that really stood out to me was like, you want to empower people, and you want them to be respected. And I want to dive a little deeper on that because any level of designer, like you go into a company and there's like companies that you enjoy working with and some that you don't. And I've had experiences with companies I like and that I have not enjoyed. And like the culture in the workplace is so important. And a lot of these designers or anyone in the space, they go into interviews and they don't really know the culture. They learn a little bit about it and they take this job, and it's like I don't know, it's like the Wild West. It's like you can get a really good job or a really bad job. And it is about respect. And like, even as a freelancer or even as an agency, it's like we want to find customers that respect us. And surprisingly, it's way harder than you would expect.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, oh, I feel like everyone should just be friendly and happy and easy to talk to and respectful with everyone else. And sometimes that doesn't happen. And it's so interesting. And I think that's really awesome that you're kind of taking the lead and saying, hey, like, this is how a good company is run. Don't settle for anything else. Like, this is by starting there and teaching people like what a respectful environment is, they're going to be able to spread that and continue to grow that.
And also just like, and this is like a really subtle thing, but it trickles down of teaching people the way they are presenting themselves. So if you're going to be, some people are just, rude, disrespectful people, but to an extent, I think people actually have more control than they think they do. So and I struggle with this all the time. If someone's like, hey, can you just do this really quick thing? And it's like 9 p.m. I'll be like, oh, okay. But it's like, if you shut that down from the beginning, you're going to create a habit. No, don't ask me to do that. And so even if I struggle, I want to make sure no one else or at least I'm not the problem for someone. So for example, like last week, one of my colleagues that I'm freelancing with, she was on vacation and she was like replying in Slack and she was like, can I just do this when I'm back? And I DM'd her separately in all caps and I said, here's the information, but do not reply to this message until you're back next week. I don't want to hear, like, please delete it. I've even said to my bosses before, like, delete it. I deleted email off my phone. That's the whole other thing. But, like, I certain Slack groups, LinkedIn, and email off my phone. And it was really bad. I would be checking it at, like, 3 a.m. I would get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. And I would check it because I just was so used to, what if they need something? And it's like, the logic side is like, no, wait. But we're so conditioned to give people something ASAP. And now I started noticing things on people's like out of office things. Some people are like, oh, like, hey, I'm out, but like if you need something, here's my phone number. I'm like, do not give your phone number. Like, no. And the last thing I'll say about this that I think really did it for me and why I want to be a role model for this behavior. One of my clients that I had last year, she was like a VP for a Fortune 500 company. And at the bottom of her email signature, it said, I might send things at weird hours, but I do not expect a reply unless you're in working hours. And just her saying that, I was like, oh my gosh, like that's she really respects people in that capacity. And that was a huge turning point for me where I was like, you're right, people are taking advantage. And then I started thinking about, oh my God, am I doing that too? Because I actually also send a lot of messages at weird times because that's just like when I get around to it or I think of it. But I never actually expect anyone to reply to me ASAP. But what if they do think I expect it because I'm not clear? So now when I'm talking to people or especially like my assistant, like, I'll just message him at like midnight. And then I'm like, go to bed. And he's like, but you just messaged me. I'm like, go to bed. I was just messaging you. So I want to get that through people's heads. And I know sometimes we don't have full control, but what you do have control is how you show up for yourself, not just for your boss, because no one's really advocating for you like you.
I love that. Yes. I think this is a good transition to talk about like you being an entrepreneur and owning your own business is like being the owner, the founder. It's like you have these things that you want your team to do. Like, hey, don't answer emails after 6. But as a founder, sometimes we work more. I know that you've worked more in weird hours throughout your career. And so it's also like making it clear and setting those expectations to your team is like, hey, I know that you guys think that you should respond because I'm like the founder or whatever, but like don't. And I think that's really important to create a good culture. And like, so talk a little bit about, so you have Converge is a passion project and then say what Anele is your mentorship. Correct?
Anele is my UX studio and also the mentorship kind of rebranding and putting all UX stuff together. Converge, for context, is a thing that I run. It's a website to help recent grads navigate life after college. So everything from the personal and professional side. So, it's not just about getting a job. You also, making friends in a new city, finding an apartment, how do you deal with roommates, all those kind of things. And so I took my whole experience about when I moved to New York and basically put it into this website with very actionable things. Like, I don't want to be another person who's just like, oh, just like be yourself and put yourself out there. But it's like, no, what can I do? This podcast is probably one of the times where I'm a little bit more open-ended, like, oh, just, trust the system. But the core of what I'm doing is like when I give people advice more in one-on-one, it's going to be like, here, you don't have to do all these things. This is what worked for me. But here is what you do, how you do the thing. Instead of just like thinking about doing it, here are like some actual steps you can do.
And Converge blew up. Like, I remember when early on, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm getting all this traction and all of these people are interested. So talk about that.
Yeah, because I came at it from such a genuine place. Like, I wasn't trying to make it into a huge thing. I just want to be helpful. That came across in the way I talked about it. Like, I didn't like pay for marketing or any of that. I literally would just share it on LinkedIn every once in a while and be like, hey, like, what do you think about this? I can't remember how many. I think there was like 80,000 users in the past few years just from like word of mouth. And wow. I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. And so we're actually getting ready for a huge relaunch. Like, I redid all this stuff, and that's been a huge overhaul. But I do want it to be like a free, accessible resource. Like, there's a lot of things all over the place, right? You can look up a million different websites, but it feels like there's nothing in one place that covers both sides of it. And trust me, I've done a lot of competitive analysis. I've UX'd a lot of this. Like, right before one of the launches, I sent it out to a lot of people to give like feedback. So really taking in that kind of take on it. And so it's like, even with passion projects, I want to make sure that the user's at the forefront.
Yes.
I love it.
Bringing it back. Yeah, that's awesome. So Anele, you have two sides to it. Maybe we talked a little bit about the mentorship already. Why don't you talk about like your UX side of it, UX, UI, your customers, what does that look like? And what do you want it to be?
Yeah, so it's still it's a little in the gray area right now. So like you said in the beginning, I'm building a house. So my focus isn't as heavy on it as when I first was doing it in December, I was like, okay, I'm gonna like go and source a lot of my own clients, kind of like what TDP does. But things kind of get in the way, and so with the house, I was like, okay, I just need to make a lot of money and pay for this down payment thing, because that was really unexpected. I still have plans to keep like scaling it, but instead of sourcing a lot of my clients, I go through a lot of agencies using my studio. And so that's kind of how it is. So I just want to be transparent about that structure. In the beginning, we did have a client where I actually could hire people, and we did more of a traditional agency style. And that is what I would like to get to, but I just can't do that for the rest of this year. But a key thing for me is just setting up that foundation of making it scalable. So even with like the mentorship program or with this, at that time I only had one employee, and then I hired an assistant, but that's more of my assistant across all the boards. But right. Making sure that I was so clear with my foundation of, these are the goals. This is like the kind of language we're using. These are the boundaries that we have. These are the tools and systems. Like, I have flowcharts for everything, even flowcharts for how I pay them, just so it's like, it has been through my head, is filtered out, and now it is on somewhere documented. And I think that is what is going to set me up for success. So when I do pull the trigger and I'm like, okay, let's actually start bringing things in, I already have that consistency in place. So it's like, yes. What kind of language are we using with our clients? How often are we talking to them? What tools are we using? Are we using Zoom? What is too much? What kind of boundaries? No, we're not going to answer calls after like 7 p.m. And those are the kind of standards. And I think that's what's going to attract people that want to work with us, because that's what's worked for me as an entity. Like, I kind of saw myself right now, Anele, as like an individual. Right. But it's the same thing. So whether I'm a person or a collective, I think it's the same values work. And so I'm just going to take that and like run with it.
I love that. And, you know, like as a founder starting something else, like building that foundation. I know we talked a lot about like just try it, see where it goes. And this doesn't contradict that. I think it's like in addition is like you have to be really clear about what your company is. And I think you have to have specific values that are not going to change.
Yeah, values. Yeah. So yeah, to be clear for all the listeners, in terms of like, you don't need to have this, everyone's always like, what's your 5-year plan? I don't think you need to do that. But when it comes to you do need to know your values inside and out. And even as a job seeker, let's say you're going for your first job or you're going for your 15th job, you still need to be so solid in how you operate, where this is where it draws the line. Or maybe there's certain companies that you're just like, I feel unethical working for you. You need to know that beforehand. And so that's the same thing with launching a business, where I'm not saying you specifically need to say, I only do UX a certain way, but for my business, I set those standards because I want to have consistency for when I bring in other people. Because it's a difference of, I can wing it by myself, but if you bring in other people, they can't wing it too.
Right.
Like, it's kind of a fine line of organized chaos. I think that's what I'm advocating for, where organized spontaneity, that's probably better because I've been working with a life coach to not be as chaotic. So Tawny, if you're listening.
So Nick's chaotic, is that another word that your cohort can't use? No chaos.
We are kind of chaotic, but they can use chaotic. I just blacklisted any generic term. So
yes, that's
any kind of thing that has to do with like everyone who says that they want to help people. I'm like, yeah, so help people. Like, I'm a storyteller. I'm like, okay, so tell me a story. Like, the people who say that they're storytellers are usually the ones who like have the most boring bios, and it's like, bruh. So that's the blacklisted list.
I totally agree. I want to know what else is on your blacklist because I feel like it should be public knowledge. Like every designer should blacklist all of these terms when looking.
I'm like, they're not helping you, dude. Like,
not at all.
And I can say that with so much confidence because the minute I took those things off of mine, like, it's worked. I'm not saying everything works for everyone, and I'm not saying that people who say those things aren't what they say. But it's like, if you want to stand out, that is not the way to do it.
Yes. So going back to like your principles and your values, I also think it's really aligned with like what you said about the people you're bringing on in your core cohort and how you address like specific like times when people work. Mm-hmm. I think having those values is going to help you align and find those people that are the perfect fit and also help them understand who you are. Yes. And so I guess like as you're bringing on cohorts, like are there do you have interviews? Do you decide like this person isn't a good fit? What does that look like?
Yeah, so this was our strictest one. So my assistant Peter, he was in the first cohort, and now he's just kind of like my right-hand man. He's like helped make Converge like everything that it is. He's the one I first hired to help with Converge, and now he's just like an ongoing volunteer, and he's been pivotal. And same with the cohort. He is at every meeting. He even hosts his own office hours too, like because he did the thing. He is exactly what my intention was. Like, he was doing all of the things, and he just needed that extra push. And like, he got a full-time job at like a great agency in New York City, and now he is giving back. He's learning. He's continuing to ask questions, and like, I talk to him every day. And so those are the kinds of people that I want to create, not create, but help grow, incubate. I don't know, but so the process is pretty strict because I do know that in order to have a certain kind of community, you need to make sure people want to be there. So it is free for people because a lot of the people that I target are like first-gen immigrants, low-income type of folks. And so I don't want to have that barrier. There's other ways that I can make money, but this is the one thing that I'm like, I really want to stick with this. So the application was actually pretty simple, But the two questions that were weighted super heavily was, what have you already been doing to better yourself? And then why do you want to be in a cohort? And that question that we asked I wasn't looking for like, oh, I just want to be a better designer. You can be a better designer without being in a group of people. What do you specifically want to get by being surrounded by 15 other people who are going through? That's what I wanted to find out. And then the question related to like, what are you currently doing was super important, because if you're just reading Medium articles, you're not ready. You're not, it's not time. It's not time for you. Unfortunately, you need to do more. And I just really don't have time right now because there's so many things going on. And I'm not trying to be like, oh, like you're not worthy. It's just, I've spent so much time repeating myself over and over that you can find the information you need to get over that hump on YouTube. Like going to events, networking with other people. But this cohort is a really special time where we do hands-on interactive feedback for people who are ready to, they're already all in. They've already done ADP lists. They've already volunteered. They've already done all these things and they need that push. And so that's a very specific person that I found. So we had 150 applicants in 2 days. And it was like insane. And so Peter was really good about laying down the hammer because I was like, oh, we should give him. He's like, no, Elena, we created a rubric for a reason. We got to stick to it. And the formula worked. We have an amazing group of people who are very like self-sufficient. Every day someone's like, hey, can I have some feedback? Everyone just jumps on it. And people are just, they're showing up for each other. They're showing up for themselves. And those are the people that I want to work with, because those are the people who are going to make things, period. And also make things that are good, because they're actually they're not just going to take the first thing or they're just going to do what the stakeholder says. They're going to like really push and question things and connect X to G to N instead of ABC. Yes. And so those are the people that I want around me.
I love that. And I think also it goes back to like, you want to teach people how to better communicate. And so I think communication is like on the forefront of being able to help people push those decisions or to communicate those decisions to stakeholders. And by giving them that knowledge and that way of communicating, it's like makes everything more enjoyable.
Oh, always. Absolutely. Yep. No, I 100% agree.
No, that is, I'm excited to watch like what these core cohorts do and these opportunities you're giving to these designers who are going to take all of these opportunities, like you said, teach other people, and they're going to join these companies and they're going to change like and better the design culture, which is like so amazing.
That's what I'm most excited about. So 4 people in the cohort have actually already gotten a job, and which is mind-boggling. I'm super excited, and like a lot of them are like actively like interviewing and they're getting very far. And the thing that I told the people who already got it is like, I really want you to stick around, because it's not about getting your first job. The things that we're going over are super long-term and holistic. And so when I do things, I do them very intentionally. So everything down to the icebreaker is there for a reason. So for example, on the first day, you have to do more get to know you things, and it's like people don't love them. But the thing is, I had them introduce each other in breakouts of like 2 people. And then when we came back to the group, they actually had to introduce the other person. But I didn't tell them they were going to do that, because I wanted to emphasize how important it is to listen to someone when you're interviewing. Because when you do interviews, you're so caught up in knowing and like mentally preparing for the perfect answer that if you're actually not listening, it kind of defeats the whole conversation part, and it will show. They're going to be like, they're not paying attention to me at all. They're just waiting for the next thing to say. And so if you can really, feel more comfortable about having an actual conversation, 1, it will take away stress. It's an interview. And then 2, you'll probably stand out because you can maybe reference something. So maybe in the beginning, some, people do that quick little banter. And they're like, oh yeah, like I just got back from vacation. And then maybe at the end, you make a reference to it because it shows you're listening. And so those are kind of skills I want to give to them without directly saying, this is a skill I'm going to try to teach you, but like kind of sliding it in. And then also by doing that, all of them had to public speak in front of a large group on Zoom, which is how most interviews are conducted now. So everyone had to talk in that session. In the other ones, I don't make everyone do it, but in this specific one, in the kickoff, everyone needed to say something because we kind of need to rip the Band-Aid off. And it's like, no, you will be uncomfortable, but you need to say it. And then the last thing was that is I said, if you don't know how to pronounce your partner's name, you need to make sure you do. Everyone in this cohort needs to be able to pronounce every single person's name. And if you feel uncomfortable, you need to ask. Because I don't want to be fostering this thing where someone has a slightly like non-American name and everyone's like, I don't know what it is. And so I want to squash that as quickly as possible. So hopefully when someone's in a situation again, they're not going to hesitate. They're going to be like, hey, can you say that again? And they'll echo it back. So all those small things.
No, I mean, like you're talking about these people that are going into these interviews and how they can like listen in all of these interviews, but that takes it so much further because like something that's really important at TDP and we've been focusing a lot on in the past few months is like customer success. And it's so interesting because we've done deep dive, read all these books. I'm trying to gather all this knowledge, do my own like UX research on customer success. And the bottom line is it's all about just like now I ask all the designers, like, did you have a casual conversation before you started your call? And that is like such a game changer to be able to like talk about your vacation, talk about the weather, talk about something random, just personal, brings it to a completely different level that just like creates such a better environment for everyone. And it makes like customers actually like that's what they remember. They're like, oh, I had a great conversation versus like, oh, they produced great designs, which of course is our goal, but like, it's like reflective.
You're selling, because especially from a business perspective, you're selling your personalities too. Because I mean, in theory, like there's so many great talented designers. You could probably pick, there's a lot of people you could hire who could equally do a good job. And that's not just like, oh, because like for TDP specifically, it's so many agencies, most of them probably could do a good job. But people probably go to you because they're like, oh wait, they get me as a person. Like, they're pleasant to be around. Like, it's really cool. And that's what I've seen on other client calls that I've had at some of these agencies, and why I like them is because we actually know some things about them, and I can feel comfortable being like, hey, I'm actually like coming to your state. Like, do you have any recommendations? And they're like, yeah, go to this place. And it's like, and then they also trust you more as an expert in your field because they're like, well, why would they? Of course they know what they're doing. They're great.
All like, it's like the stars align. It's like just that little bit of effort to get to know someone takes it to the next level. It's crazy. I mean, it makes sense, but when you think about how simple it really is.
And I actually use that tactic, and I give that advice to people when it comes to networking, is ask something about like, what's something that you're really passionate about? Like, do you have a passion project? I think that's a really good question to ask in one, because a lot of times people are just, okay, what does the day-to-day look like? Or tell me about the culture. But it's like, they are just people. And so they are more likely to help you if you can, find the thing and like, oh, I saw that you play volleyball. I also play volleyball. But it really is a helpful tool to just know people and be a person. And remember, like, you can use that for yourself too. Like, you don't only have to talk about work. Actually, people don't want that. Like, I always tell my mentees that you're not really selling your skills, because I mean, at the end of the day, all of you are going for entry-level UX jobs. You're great, but like, are you really that much great than the other ones? No. And I'll tell them that. I'm like, listen, that's just kind of how it is. But the difference is they will hire someone that they want to spend 40 hours a week with. That is who they're hiring. So you better like be really great. Like, your work can only go so far. So just and confidence is also just a huge thing. Yes, totally. Oh my gosh, I agree 1,000% with everything. So kind of finishing up is like, what's next for you, Elena? Like, what are you going to be doing in the near future? Do you have any goals or passion projects or things you're working on? So a few moving parts. Like, this really goes along with the, wow, didn't expect that. I can't give you too many details about it, but I'm founding a startup, completely separate, but an opportunity fell into our lap that was like really too good to be true, where it was already backed by like a former like Walmart exec, and so he wants to like co-found it with us, and we already have funding, and like all I did was show up to a meeting and they said, hey, we have this. And so I was like, I really can't turn this down. So I'm really excited and I'm also just excited to be in this space. It's to help cancer patients. And so that is just a really cool opportunity. And we already have like a client in the pipeline. And so I'm going to like lead the product design with that. And I already have a team of some good friends, and it just happened. And so that's a really serendipitous thing of like, you know, these really cool things happen when you put in the effort that's a huge thing. You're not working super hard towards one specific thing. You're working really hard to allow things to happen. So I did all that UX work. So when something like this came, I'm ready. I'm ready to lead a product team. So it's not like I've been practicing my whole life so I can found a startup and do this. No, but I want to make sure that something is here, and now I'm like, oh, I can say yes to anything because I feel confident and I have the skill set. So stay tuned for that. That's really all I can say about that opportunity, but I'm really excited about that. So I don't really know what that means for Anele, but there's always room for it. And so it might just ebb and flow depending on like what's going on. And I'm not trying to like jump projects. It's just this just kind of happened. The mentorship, I want to continue. I want to implement more volunteers and see what that looks like. Converge, after the relaunch, I just really want that to just embrace what it is. I'm kind of taking a break from doing a lot of big events related to it because I want to focus on the mentorship program, but I want it to be just there for people. That's like my bread and butter of, I'm not trying to make everything super fancy. I'm not trying to make a bunch of money off of this. I don't need to do all these social media posts. It's just going to exist in the way that it needs to be for people right now. So those are the core things in the next few years. I don't really have the longest term goals anymore because I realize they never happen because things change so much. I definitely want to be in this space where I can be creative and I can lead people because I love doing that. I like being able to set stage and create those kind of opportunities because I know what works and what doesn't work. And I'm still learning based on like other people's leadership styles and like what they're doing. But I've seen and I've gotten a lot of feedback. So every time I do something, I get so much feedback from people. I'm like, okay, please tell me, what can we do? So I'm very confident that no matter what happens next, even if it's not planned, it's going to be fine. It'll be more than fine.
It'll definitely be more than fine.
It'll be wonderful.
Like, that's amazing. Yes, it will be. Like, I feel like everything you touch, it's like you turn it into what you want it to be. Like, like, I'm super excited for you. Like, all of these things are so, so amazing. And, like, knowing you from a couple years ago to where you are today, I think you're still Elena, but like you have just way more confidence and you just push yourself and you've achieved so much. And like, I'm so excited to watch all of the other things that are going to happen for you.
And thank you. And I really couldn't be here without you. Like, and for everyone listening, like find a Dianne and also be a Dianne. Like you always have to have both. I think that's like a huge thing. You always have to have someone to look up to and someone that can look up to you, and that will never stop. So those are my parting words.
Yeah. Yes, I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining. It was so great to hear all of your stories. I feel like there's so many amazing things we chatted about. Can't even like name all of them. But thank you so much for being here. And yeah, we'll chat soon. We have to redo this when you have all of your new amazing things coming up in the future.
Yeah, who knows? Like I'm keeping an eye on all the things that you're working on, and I love all these different posts you have, and so I'm excited to hear the rest of your podcast series. So I'm staying tuned for that.
That was a nice little pitch in there. Yeah. I love it.
Don't worry, she didn't tell me to do that.
I didn't.
Hashtag not sponsored.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Elena.